And here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is our second Saturday series seminar for September. My name is Susan Jones, and Charlie DiFerdinando is here with me today at the Animas Museum. It's a busy day. We've got a lot going on starting this month. September in Durango is History Live Month, sponsored by the Southwest Colorado Humanities Roundtable. And today's webinar is one of the many events going on this month that were arranged by the Roundtable. To learn more about it, be sure to visit their website, and I'll put a link to that website along with the recording that you'll get tomorrow of this session. As you may know, this is the 50th or golden anniversary of the La Plata County Historical Society. And in honor of that, back in the spring, we examined the gold rush to the La Platas. There are two webinars that Charlie did back in March and April. And we uncovered a lot of information. I think everybody was really thrilled to kind of see. We knew it was there, but just didn't get it all together. So we're excited about that. Coal mining maybe isn't quite as exciting as gold or silver mining, but in many ways it was perhaps even more valuable for Durango and I'll say La Plata County. Charles DiFerdinando will be telling the story today. If you love history and you don't know Charlie, well, you should. Charlie is a fifth-generation Durango native, Durango High School and Fort Lewis College graduate, and was in at the beginning when Durango started talking about preserving its history and starting a museum. He is the one that rebuilt the Joy Cabin here on the museum grounds, which you can visit virtually on our website or in person nowadays. And he was the lead narrator of the Durango and Silverton Railroad's onboard historical narration program. If you come to the museum, you can meet Charlie. He's in charge of our visitor service and is a wonderful resource to all of us. Before I turn it over to Charlie, let me again go over a little bit of Zoom housekeeping. We're using the Zoom webinar feature, which means that you are all muted and your videos are off. At the bottom of your screen, it should be, you may need to mouse down a little bit to see it. You'll see there are some icons. To minimize distractions today, we've disabled the chat function. However, if you have an immediate issue or question, please click on the Q&A icon and we'll be monitoring that. At the end of the talk, hold your questions. We'll open up for questions at the end, and you can either click on the little hand and we'll allow you to unmute and you can ask your question, or you can type it into the chat box and we'll read it and answer the question for you. This session is being recorded and you will receive an email in 24 hours with a link to the recording. With that, let me turn it over to Charlie.
Good afternoon, everybody. We got a lot to cover, so I guess we better get moving. So anyway, let's start with the first slide. Here's a gentleman whose name is John A. Porter, and he is tied to coal. I mean, his whole life sort of surrounded the coal industry, but he is one of the movers and shakers that helped found Durango and open up this area. He came here long before Durango ever was established. John A. Porter was born in Berlin, Connecticut in 1850. But his family moved to California. He was raised in California, but he returned east for his higher education. He attended Columbia School of Mines in New York City, and he took further courses at the Royal Academy of Mines in Freiburg, Germany. After he graduated from the Royal Academy, he returned to America, and he held a position as an assayer for the Richmond Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company in Eureka, Nevada. Now in 1875, he's in Colorado, and he sets out to do some exploration in southwestern Colorado. And he was over around Pueblo, and he decides to come over here into the San Juans. And in 1875, he's making his way over here to sort of just survey the country, see what kind of assets are here that might eventually be exploited. Um, and there's a great story about how when he came into the Animas Valley, he came down the road through Horse Gulch, which was the road over from the La Plata drainage. And on his way from Pueblo, he carried a number of items with him that he thought he would need to do some prospecting or some assaying, early assaying. And he was coming horseback, and he had a horse that was a little bit skittish, but he was really loaded down. He was carrying clothing and food, of course, and he was carrying his small prospector's pick. He had his geologist hammer, a blowpipe, some rock drills, which he carried to do metallurgical tests. And he also had 2 saddlebags full of coal, 30 pounds of coal that he had brought with him that he thought he might need to do some assaying. Well, he's coming down Horse Gulch, and he's observing the local geology on either side of the Horse Gulch Canyon, and he realizes there's outcroppings of coal. And he's so totally disgusted that he gets off his horse and dumps the 2 saddlebags of coal into the gully and rides on. He didn't realize that this whole area was underlaid with coal, and that changed his whole perspective of this area. In the mid-70s, he becomes the manager of, he moves on to Silverton, and he becomes the manager of the Green Smelter up in Silverton. Then following the purchase of the Green Smelter by the San Juan Mining and Smelting Company, they acquire the Green Smelter. And that's when he decides, along with representatives of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad Company, such as General William Jackson Palmer, that they need to move the smelter to the new town of Durango, which was founded in September of 1880. This was in the grand scheme of the railroad. The railroad did not reach Silverton until the end of July 1882, but when Durango was established in September of 1880, they realized that this whole area was underlaid with coal, and that would lead to Durango becoming an industrial giant, because that coal was going to fuel all of the industries related to mining and smelting and so forth. So they decide that they're going to close the Green Smelter in Silverton, and they will move that equipment down to Durango and incorporate it into an entirely new smelter. Prior to that, they were having to fuel the Green Smelter in Silverton with charcoal produced from local timber, or what small amounts of coal they could be taking in by pack animal, which was very expensive. Now, in the early days, before Durango was founded in 1880, there were some small coal mines operating in the Animas City area. They were over on the La Plata, they were over on the Florida River drainage, but they were very small mines, and they were basically producing just enough coal for domestic consumption of the people living in Animas City. So anyway, John A. Porter goes on to become involved not only with the smelter, he's one of the first major developers of commercial coal mining in the Durango vicinity. He is one of the founders of the Porter Fuel Company, which we'll talk a little bit more about a little later. He moves on to Denver a little later in life, but he's also involved in a lot of other industries in Durango. He was one of the early investors in the electric company in Durango, which was formed in 1885. In the 1890s, he was involved with the purchase and electrification of the trolley line in Durango, and it was because of him that the trolley line got extended all the way to Animas City from Durango and so forth. So, and he ran into some problems with the coal business a little later in life, and we'll talk about that as we move on. Let's go to the next slide. Here's an early view of Durango. This was Durango in 1889, in February of 1889, early spring, late winter, early spring. This picture is taken by J.A. Boston. He took it from up on Smelter Mountain, looking down on the San Juan and New York smelter. You can see the roundhouse, the depot, and Main Avenue. And it's looking up towards Animas City. It's a great early view of Durango. And of course, this is in the spring before the big fire that occurred on July the 1st of 1889. So the smelter was the first big industry in Durango. And of course, it required coal for fuel. And coal had been discovered in Smelter Mountain. Up near the top, there's a layer of sandstone up there, and underneath the sandstone is a huge seam of coal. So one of the first coal mines developed was the San Juan coal mine to fuel the New York and San Juan smelter. The smelter, of course, was sort of a subsidiary of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Several of General William Jackson Palmer's business partners that he was associated when he first came to Colorado became part of the railroad and part of the early smelter. They included William Abraham, J. Bell, John A. Porter, Robert E. Sloan, and former Colorado Territorial Governor A.C. Hunt. They were the ones that really had birthed Durango. Together, they had purchased homestead land that formed the basis of Durango. Porter remained a steadfast friend of General William Jackson Palmer, and they were both avid outdoorsmen. They jointly owned the Granite Peaks Ranch over on the Florida, or towards the Florida, and on the Los Pinos River. That was a favorite recreation area for them. They would host hunting and fishing parties for all of their business associates over at the Granite Peaks Ranch. So let's go on to the next slide. Here's just a great picture of an early mine. We're not exactly sure where this is. It could be pretty much anywhere in the county. We think it's over in the Lightner Creek area west of Durango, but you can see they're in the process of building a tipple, which would be the loading structure for coal once it comes out of the mine. So the mine would be clear over in the hillside to the left, and there would have been tracks coming out of the portal of the mine to this tipple structure, which was a storage facility. And then down below, there would have been an area where wagons could be loaded from the tipple. Let's go to the next slide. In the early days before the railroad, any coal mine that existed in the area was dependent on freighters using wagons to move coal to wherever it was needed, whether it was for domestic use in homes or whether it was for blacksmiths or whatever. Freighters were involved in moving that coal. And I'm sure in the early days of the Green Smelter in Silverton, these freighters were actually hauling coal all the way to Silverton, which was a very expensive process. Now, coal is not as heavy as other stone and so forth. So a ton of coal, you can put several tons of coal on a wagon. So let's go to the next slide. When the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad came into the Animas Valley, one of the first really big coal companies that got established was the La Plata Coal and Iron Company. It was located north of Bosea, which is out where Mercy Hospital is located today. And eventually a spur line was built off of the main line of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad going north to the mine site. And this map sort of shows that. The problem with this map is that they put Falfa in the wrong location. I'm not sure who drew this map, but the dark line towards the bottom of the map is the current Highway 160 going east. And Falfa is actually south on 172, on Highway 172, several miles south of that intersection. But the La Plata mine did not really pan out. It eventually closes, but it was a large operation. The problem there, it was very gassy, and part of the gas problem there, it wasn't just methane gas. They also had hydrogen sulfide, which is very, very poisonous. So the La Plata mine, where it was located, was east of Carbon Junction, basically. And so where Highway 3 goes south from Durango out towards Walmart, that is the Carbon Junction area. And there's a ridge to the east. And on the other side of that ridge is where the La Plata mine was located. It operated from 1891 until 1906. And the old boarding house and dining room was relocated from that camp at the La Plata mine. It's now the Presbyterian Church out on the Florida Mesa. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a great early picture of Durango. Over center right, you see the railroad depot. Down here in the center of the picture, you see both a railroad bridge and a road bridge. You also see the Graydon flour mill, and right down about in the center to the bottom of the picture there, you sort of see smoke rising from a structure. Those are the coke ovens. The smelter required a hotter burning fuel, and that was coke. Coke is a refined coal product. So, and again, this picture was taken after 1891 because in the picture you can see the 1891 courthouse and so forth. So let's go to the next slide. Here's a close-up picture of those coke ovens. These coke ovens were operated by the New York and San Juan smelter to provide fuel for the smelter. The coal mine was up above on the hillside. That hill that you see behind the coke ovens is Smelter Mountain. And this is west of the river on Lightner Creek. You can see that it's a big stone structure. Coal was loaded into these ovens, and there was a process where it was heated to drive off impurities, and what was left was coke, which again is a hotter burning fuel, which is a product of coal. Let's go to the next slide. This is a group of people touring the San Juan coal mine. which was the mine that provided coal for the coke ovens and the smelter. You can see these ladies are all dressed up, but they're taking a little excursion to the mine. We believe these ladies are part of the Krager family. The Kragers had a ranch up at Trimble on the east side of the Animas Valley. Let's go to the next slide. Here is the tipple structure for the San Juan coal mine. And again, this is just west of where the coke ovens were located. There was a tramway that brought coal down from the portal of the mine to this loading structure over by the new Holiday Inn west of town. On the hillside, you can still see the stone piers that supported this tipple structure. Let's go to the next slide. Here is a close-up view of that tipple structure looking east towards Durango. And to the left of the structure, you see one of the smokestacks for the New York and San Juan Smelting Company. This is up on the hill there again. And there was a tramway that brought the coal down from the portal of the mine to this structure. Then there's a chute that went down to a railroad siding, and then rail cars were used to move the coal to the coking ovens. Let's go to the next slide. This is that same group of people that we believe are in the Krager family that were touring the San Juan coal mine. They're up on the actual tunnel in the mine went from the north side of Smelter Mountain through the mountain to the south side. And this is on the southern portal on the back side of Smelter Mountain. You can see the coal cars there. You can also see piles of timber there that were used as cribbing inside the mine, and also they were used for ties on the track for the coal cars. Let's go to the next slide. This picture shows the tipple structure on the north side of Smelter Mountain. You can see that line going up through that draw, and up towards the top of the mountain there is the northern portal of the San Juan coal mine, and the tramway track ran down that cleared section on the hillside. And even today, if you look at the north side of Smelter Mountain there in that draw, you can still see the evidence of where that tramway existed. Next slide. This is another view on the other side of Smelter Mountain on the southern portal. The building that you see in the background there was what we call a blower house. It was part of the ventilation system for the mine. There was a large motor inside that structure with a big fan unit, which introduced fresh air into the mine. You can see the coal cars on the track there, and one of the mules that was used, mules were used to move the cars in and out of the portals of the mine. Next slide. Here's another view showing the blower house, and again, the mules are hitched up to cars there. It looks like they have timber, cribbing timber loaded on the cars, ready to go into the mine. So the San Juan coal mine was one of the first large commercial coal mines, and again, it enabled the smelter to operate and so forth. But for a while, it also supplied other needs of coal in the Durango area. Next slide. One of the other big commercial coal mines was known as the City Coal Mine, and this is a view downriver from Durango. It's looking north, and over sort of upper center there, you see a trestle structure. And this was the spur line that ran off the main line of the railroad up to the city coal mine, which was located in Horse Gulch. And today, where we have Larry Valdez Drive, which is a connection between Highway 3 and Highway 16550, this is where this trestle was located. And the railroad spur came off of the main line down near the river and made its way up past what now is Sonic Drive-In and up 3rd Street, up behind the area just north of where the Horse Gulch Medical Center is. Next slide, please. Here is the tipple structure at the city coal mine. The city coal mine was owned by the Gold King mining company. So most of the production of the city coal mine at one time was being shipped to Silverton or up to Gladstone, north of Silverton, to run the equipment in the Gold King mine. There was another Gold King mine in the La Platas, but this particular mine was controlled by the Gold King Corporation up in San Juan County, north of Silverton. As you can see there's box cars on the railroad siding under the loading tipple. Box cars were preferred for shipping coal to Silverton because they would fill the box cars half full of coal, and the coal then would be protected from the elements. Then, once the coal was removed from the box cars in Silverton, they did not return empty. They came back filled with ore concentrates from the mines, which then were either taken to Durango Sampling Works or directly to the smelters to be processed. And again, we eventually had 3 smelters in the Durango area. The New York and San Juan smelter was the first. Then Standard Smelter was built about a half-mile downriver, and the 3rd smelter was located up in Animas City. Next slide, please. Okay, before we, that city coal mine, the mine was quite a ways east of the mouth of Horse Gulch, and there was a tramway system. You can see the track coming down off the hill there to the tipple. And there was also other coal mines up Horse Gulch. And remember, Horse Gulch is where John Porter first noticed that there was natural outcroppings of coal. So there were a number of coal mines in the Horse Gulch area. Okay, next slide. This picture is taken on the High Line north of Rockwood on the railroad route to Silverton. And this is, it's all boxcars, but what this is actually a coal train. And there's a boxcar there that is a Silverton Northern boxcar. Many of the others are regular Denver and Rio Grande boxcars. But again, you have a double header there, locomotives up at the head of the train, and there were probably helper engines at the other end of the train. All of the mines in the Silverton district, and then eventually on the Red Mountain district, required coal from the Durango mines to fuel their steam engines, which ran all of their lifts and their milling equipment and so forth. So tons and tons, thousands of tons of coal were shipped annually between the Durango mines and the mining districts in San Juan County and other parts of southwestern Colorado. In 1906, November the 29th of 1906, the town fathers of Silverton wrote a letter to the Durango Herald complaining about the shortage of coal in Silverton. And I'll just read you some highlights of this letter that was published in the Durango Herald. It says, for the past month, the railroad has been appropriating the coal ordered by Silverton people for its own use. accepting such as it diverted to fill its orders in the valley towns. The result is that there is a shortage of coal at the present time in Silverton. All coal dealers are practically out, and customers are in luck if able to secure even a half a ton of coal. So here it is, November. They've had their first snow in Silverton, and they're really worried that nobody's got their winter coal supply yet. So eventually, the result of this letter, and it goes on, it finally gets the attention of the superintendent of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad system at the time. And he's worried about losing freight traffic to Silverton if something isn't done. And so he assures the town fathers in Silverton that the railroad will quit appropriating these coal shipments, and they will get their coal so that they have a supply of coal for the winter. Again, those boxcars were used to bring back ore concentrates to the smelters in Durango. In 1902, miners started to question their rate of pay. At that time, most mines were paying by the ton. So the more tonnage a miner could produce in a day, the more he was paid. Well, if you were in a good mine, that was a pretty easy way to make a living. But if you were in some of these lower quality mines where there was a lot of rock and very small veins of coal, it was not a fair way to pay people, because they would work themselves to death to get a small amount of coal, and they just were starving to death. So during this whole period, labor disputes become a huge issue. They actually start clear back in the 1890s, but labor is waking up. Labor is trying to organize. Unions are moving in, trying to unionize mines. The mine owners, of course, are fighting unionization. The union activity starts in the hard rock mines, and then it filters down to the coal mines. In October 1903, Durango Herald, there's an article that states that there's a possible strike going to be called in Colorado for coal miners. And the newspaper questions why Durango is included in this strike, because Durango, the mine owners in Durango had already granted their coal miners an 8-hour day, and they were paying them $3 a day. They had eliminated the tonnage payment system, and they were paying $3 a day, which was the highest rate in Colorado at that time. And the Porter mines had been paying that wage for at least 2 years when this was published in 1903. Let's go to the next slide. This picture is 1911, and it's looking west from Durango, from the rail yard. That bridge structure that you see there is the railroad bridge going west, which was utilized by the Rio Grande Southern Railroad and the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad in their servicing of the smelter and the coke ovens and other mines in that area. And this is after the 1911 flood, and you can see that they pushed gondola cars full of rock onto the railroad bridge to try to keep it from washing away. They did, but you can see the severe damage to the abutments, the approaches to the bridge. And of course, the flood of 1911 happened in October. This was at the peak time of coal shipments into the mining camps. Silverton and other mining camps had not received their winter supply of coal yet. And so it was a big problem. They were worried that if the railroads were not restored in a very fast, quick manner, people were going to freeze to death for the coming winter. So a lot of work was spent in getting the railroads operating again as quickly as possible. And again, the hillside that you see there is the backside, the north side of Smelter Mountain, and it's looking westward up Lightner Creek Canyon, where the highway corridor runs today. Next slide. This is a good map that sort of shows the railroads in this part of southwestern Colorado. Again, you see the where Durango is laid out there. You can see up to the north there is Animas City. This shows the Rio Grande Southern Railroad, which was completed in 1890, going west. And on this map, you also see the Boston Fuel Company spur line that ran up to the Boston Fuel mine on the backside of Perrins. So you see Perrins, the town of Perrins indicated there. It was a coal camp. You also see Twin Buttes there. And then further to the left, on the Rio Grande Southern route in Wildcat Canyon, you see the town of Porter indicated. That was where the first Porter Fuel Company mine was located. And then beyond that is Pine Ridge. This shows the route headed towards Hesperus, the Rio Grande Southern route. Also indicated there on the right side near Durango is Horse Gulch, if people aren't familiar where Horse Gulch is. So anyway, next slide. This picture just shows railroad sidings over near the coke ovens west of town on Lightner Creek. You can see one siding in the top part of the picture there. Those are actually livestock or cattle cars put on the siding there. The railroad cars that you see towards the front there are in front of the coke ovens. This is a fairly late picture, closer to the time when the Rio Grande Southern Railroad was abandoned. The coke ovens obviously are abandoned also. Now, what happened to the coke ovens? There is nothing there. Well, in the 1930s, Sacred Heart Parish in South Durango decided to build a new church. And at that time, the WPA was employing a lot of members of Sacred Heart Church as stonemasons to build the fairgrounds, grandstands, and other stone structures in the area. And so the parish decided to salvage the stone from the coke ovens for material to build the new Sacred Heart Church. And so the coke ovens live on in the structure of Sacred Heart Church down on 5th Avenue and 3rd Street. Let's go to the next slide. One of the other big first commercial coal mines in the area was the Boston Coal and Fuel Company, which located their mine on Perrins Peak. And it was so high up on the backside of Perrins, they started the mining operations up there. They realized that they had a huge deposit of coal. In one of their veins of coal was 12 feet thick, which was a huge vein of coal for this part of the country. The problem was you were going straight up the mountain there to get to the camp, the coal camp. So Boston Coal and Fuel hired Thomas Wigglesworth to engineer a railroad line that would tie in with the Rio Grande Southern and the Denver and Rio Grande system, so that they would be able to move large amounts of coal from the mine at Perrins down to the railroad so that it could be shipped wherever it was needed. So this photograph shows the day of the Silver Spike ceremony for the completion of the Boston Coal and Fuel Company's rail line from Franklin Junction up to the coal camp of Perrins. Franklin Junction was on the Rio Grande southern west of town over near Twin Buttes. And you can see here that there's all kinds of people sitting on flat cars. They utilized flat cars to get people up to the mine on the day of the Silver Spike ceremony. They drove a Silver Spike up at the end of the line at the mine. They had a large balloon loop up at Perrins so that the trains could be turned up there. And but there were a number of switchbacks on the line getting up to Perrins. They invited the entire community to come to this event. They promised them food and tours of the mine. They expected 200 people to come. And on the day of the event, over 400 people showed up at the depot at Main Avenue. They had to use a Denver and Rio Grande train to get the people from the depot over to Franklin Junction. Then people debarked the Denver and Rio Grande train and were met by the Boston Coal and Fuel Company's train. They had flat cars that they had nailed canvas to the deck of the flat cars so that people wouldn't get their clothing soiled. And they loaded up people, and they had so many people that they had to run two sections. They had to make two trips to get everybody up to the mine. There was a news note in the paper in February of 1901 that announced the completion of the Boston Coal and Fuel Company's spur line to Perrins. So let's go to the next slide. Here's just a newspaper ad for Boston Coal and Fuel Company, their Perrins Peak coal. It was a very high grade of coal, and you could order it in town. Most of the coal mines advertised in the newspaper almost daily, but this is specifically for Perrins Peak coal here. Let's go to the next slide. Here's actually a picture taken up at Perrins, and you can see miners down in the lower part of the picture there. You see miners at the beginning of a shift getting ready to go down into the mine. They're loaded on coal cars, getting ready to head into the mines. In this particular picture, we received this picture from the Canini family, and their grandfather, Mike Canini, was one of the miners in this picture. I also had two relatives that were working at the Perrins mine. My relatives were Luigi Palandrani and Oreste Di Ferdinando. So lots of people worked in the mining industry. A lot of Italian immigrants actually were recruited to come to this area to work in the mines at one time or another, or work on the railroad. Let's go to the next slide. Here's another view of Perrins taken a little higher up on the peak, looking down on the balloon loop of the railroad and the loading tipple. You can see sort of a large pond there that was a catch basin for water that came down off the mountains. You can also see a number of structures in the background there. There was a dining hall, a boarding house. There was a number of small houses, company houses built for employees to live in. The Giacchino family had a saloon at Perrins. There was a schoolhouse at Perrins. and so forth. So it was quite a little community at one time with a fair number of miners. Let's go to the next slide. Here's another view of Perrins, again, showing the loading tipple structure. You can see some rail cars there waiting to be loaded, and you can see some of the company structures in the background, and over to the left, you can see a whole row of small structures. Those were cottages that were for miners to live in and their families. And again, families lived at Perrins, and so a schoolhouse was built there to educate those children. Next slide. Now here's a view of the Porter Fuel Company mine in Wildcat Canyon. And again, another company town sprang up that was named Porter in Wildcat Canyon, where employees of the Porter Fuel Company resided. Again, there was a schoolhouse built at Porter. This was also on the Rio Grande Southern Railroad line. So there was a railroad depot and a water tank at Porter. Again, this shows the tipple structure. They had mines on both sides of the canyon. And so that large trestle structure there was how they moved the coal from the east side of the canyon over to the loading tipple on the west side of the canyon. This is sort of looking south. Let's go to the next slide. This is another view, but this looks a little further south, and you can see a building up towards the top of the picture and off to the left of center with smokestacks. That was the powerhouse where they had electric generating units that supplied electricity to run lifts and light the Porter mine. And beyond that, clear up towards the top to the left is the railroad depot for Porter. And you can't see it, but there's a water tank there also, and so forth. Here's a little news note from, this is from the Durango Herald, 1905, December of 1905. The headline was "Biggest Payroll in Porter's History." Today is the regular monthly payday for the Porter Fuel Company, on whom larger demands have been made for coal during the past few months than during any of the former years since the company has operated in the Durango coal fields. Mr. Bagby has been busier today than ever, tearing off checks than he has ever had in his life. The payroll for the past month exceeds $20,000, and indications are that it will be largely increased during the coming month. So rapidly are the orders piling up for coal. Silverton is the chief factor, but the domestic demands are rapidly increasing also. Let's go to the next slide. Here's a hand-drawn map of Porter that came to us from the Bodo family. Again, it indicates where different structures were. This was their best reminiscence of where people lived and where things are located. There's not a whole lot there today to indicate what was going on. Let's go to the next slide. The Porter Fuel Company also developed a mine over at Hesperus, Colorado. And this is a map showing where the Hesperus mine was located. And again, it was serviced by the Rio Grande Southern Railroad. Let's go to the next slide. This is the water tank at Hesperus, and the structure to the left of the water tank is the section house. There was a large ornate depot built in Hesperus to service that community. Unfortunately, it burned at one point, and none of that exists anymore. Let's move to the next slide. There were a lot of small mines that produce coal for the domestic market. This is a picture of the Bodino family. They leased after they were in the boarding house and saloon business until they were put out of business by prohibition in Colorado in 1916. At that time, the Bodinos leased the Morningstar coal mine from Robert Dwyer, who was one of the early homesteaders in the Animas Valley. And they operated the Morningstar mine for many years. Well, this is just a family outing. It has everybody posed in one of the coal cars, and of course, one of the trusty mules there that was used to haul coal in and out of the mine. Let's go to the next slide. This shows the loading tipple at the Morningstar mine. It was not serviced by the railroad. It was further west. This is a little later picture, probably when the Zaletti family took over the operation of the Morningstar mine. The other structure there is the scale house. If you took your truck or wagon over to buy coal, you weighed it before you loaded it in the scale house. And then once you loaded your coal, your vehicle was weighed again to determine the tonnage of coal that you would be charged for. Let's go to the next slide. This is a great picture showing Lena Bodino on the front porch of their home on 3rd Avenue in the 500 block. You can notice over there on the porch railing, there's a sign that says, orders will be taken for Morningstar coal. So anybody in Durango could go right up to the Bodino home and leave an order for coal. During all of this period, beginning back in, well, before 1907, as commercial coal mining really came to a head in this area, everybody was speculating that a standard gauge railroad was going to be built into the area to take coal out of this area to Arizona and down to El Paso, Texas, where there were large smelters that lacked coal for fuel. And so there was a lot of land speculation where people were trying to buy land to get coal rights, hoping that the value would go up and that these railroads would come in and coal mining would become a huge industry. Well, when Teddy Roosevelt became president, he started a conservation movement, and the federal government started monitoring what was going on with coal lands, and they tried to make it more difficult for common people to take up claims and so forth. So in 1907, the Justice Department and the federal government sent in a man by the name of Joseph Walker, who was a Secret Service agent, to investigate what they considered land fraud, where people were taking up homesteads and speculating that there was coal under it, and they thought that was illegal. Anyway, Joseph Walker was killed on November 1st, 1907. He became the first Secret Service agent in the United States to die in service. He was over at the Hesperus mine, operated by the Porter Fuel Company. John Porter no longer owned the Porter Fuel Company at that time. He had already sold out to the Union Pacific Railroad. Anyway, Walker gets killed. 2 local men admitted being involved in his killing. They said it was self-defense. They were acquitted locally, but then they were rearrested and they were brought up with conspiracy charges at a later date. That got thrown out of court and so forth. But it made national news when the first Secret Service agent of the United States died here in La Plata County over at Hesperus. Let's go to the next slide. This is our one and only Violet Smith. Violet Smith got a lot of publicity because of her ownership of the King Coal Mine. She had a long-standing feud running with federal inspectors. She would not allow them on her property. She felt that she could control safety issues in her mine and didn't need to be told by the federal government what or how to do things. Violet Smith has a connection to Animas City. She lived right across the street on 31st and West 2nd. She raised her family. Her kids went to school here at the Animas City School. She and her husband became partners in the King Coal Mine out in the western part of La Plata County. They eventually bought out their partners and became sole owners of the King Coal Mine. They operated it for many, many years, even after her husband died. Let's go to the next slide. This is a sign that Violet posted on her property that no inspectors would be allowed on this property and so forth. So this tells you the type of person she was. She wasn't afraid of these inspectors. Sometimes she would meet them at the gate with a shotgun. And one inspector tried to pull a gun on her one time. She overpowered him, took the gun away from him, kicked him in the butt, and told him, "Don't come back." So anyway, I think we're running out of time here. And so we're going to sort of leave it at that. There's a lot more that we could have gone into over the labor disputes and so forth, but maybe we'll leave that for another talk. The King Coal Mine is still in existence. It's the only commercial coal mine still operating in La Plata County. It's presently owned by an international conglomerate. The coal that's mined there is trucked down to Gallup, New Mexico, where it's offloaded on trains, and it's sent down to Mexico to fuel cement kilns. So it's part of the international economy. All right, I think I'll turn it back over to Susan. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. That was great. So many things that we've forgotten in a lot of our combined history. So really interesting stuff. Now I'm going to ask for questions. We do have one popped up. Are there any railroad beds left in existence other than spur lines near the hospital that has public access where somebody could ride a mountain bike for any distance?
No. When the railroad right-of-ways were abandoned, the way Colorado law is, those right-of-ways revert to the adjacent property owners. And so most of the railroad beds are on private property. And you, unless you have permission, you cannot access them.
There was a definitive answer. Yeah, I didn't know of any other than routes that are already documented. This would have been a great place to have a lot of rail trails, but unfortunately we don't. Any other questions? Go ahead and you can raise your hand using the little Q&A icon and I'll unmute you, or you can type your answers into the Q&A. I'm not seeing any. You can always, if you do have a question or you think of anything, oh, here we go. Question, are the mines on Ewing Mesa part of what's been referred to as the Horse Gulch mines?
No. The Ewing Mesa mines, that's a fairly recent, that was actually a strip mining operation. But they were mining into the same coal seams that had previously been mined in underground operations. But the Ewing Mesa mine is a fairly recent, I don't remember the exact years, but that was a actual strip mining operation, and it didn't last very long.
Okay. We got a comment. The upper end of the La Plata Coal and Iron Company is a public trail accessible from the east side of Horse Gulch. So
Okay,
there's your, it's probably well documented where you can get on some of the old parts of the rails trails.
yeah. All I knew is you can't access it from the south.
All right, thanks, Joe. Anybody else? And if you do think of a question, feel free to email us at info@animasmuseum.org or give us a call at 970-259-2402. And we'll do what we can to answer any questions. Do one more check. Right now, we do have one of our history pop-up exhibits at the museum. It's on coal and does have some more background and pictures. So if you want to learn a little more about coal and coal mining in the Durango area. Oh, hang on. There's another question. Are there any structures still in existence at Smelter Mountain?
No,
Yeah, it's hard to believe that all these things were
well,
there.
the footings for that tipple structure for the San Juan coal mine are still on the hillside, on the over there by the new Holiday Inn. But there's no actual structures. It's just the stone and cement piers.
Okay, so come by if you do have other questions, you think of something else, and see our little pop-up exhibit. It'll be up for a little over a week more until we move on to our next exhibit. And you can also take a selfie wearing a miner's hat and with that Violet Smith's wonderful mine sign from the King Coal Mine. So come on in. But that leads to our next webinar for October. It will be on the early photographers of Durango and will feature Kathy Gibson, who's photographer Frank Goner's great granddaughter. Kathy did a great, very popular program for us last year about her grandfather, which is available on our website. And this year we're going to look at a bunch of different of the early photographers that were taking pictures here in Durango and La Plata County. Again, this program has been part of the History Live month, and we would really appreciate if you give us some feedback. When you get your email tomorrow with a link to the recording, there'll also be a link to a survey from the roundtable, and we beg, please, please, please take a few minutes and fill out the survey so we can be sure to continue to provide the kind of programming that you want and that interests you, both in all our monthly webinars and next year for the roundtables activities. Next Saturday, September 17th, we have a really special live event coming up in conjunction with the Durango and Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. Historian and author John Steinley will be joining us. Some of you might remember that he gave a talk here last summer about his book, Colorado and the Silver Crash, the Panic of 1893. He will be portraying Senator Henry Teller, who actually did come to Animas City and to Durango. This time, Henry Teller is going to give a whistle-stop speech regarding the election of 1896, just as it would have been done from the back of a parlor car with a live Steve engine right behind or in front, depending on your perspective, of the depot at the Durango and Silverton. This is really exciting. The Animas Museum will be closed next Saturday. We're all going to be down there at the depot. So you come check out the museum that's down there if you haven't already. There's always wonderful things going on. And the live performance will be at 10:30, 1 p.m. and 2:15. And we'll hang around for questions and to talk about whatever you want all day long. Each performance will be about 15 minutes of the whistle top talk, just as it would have been then, because they wouldn't have had seats built for the trains going through. And then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. So it should be really fascinating thing. There's a lot going on downtown, from the farmers market, and we'll be there too, to the Second Avenue Arts Festival next weekend. So be sure to come down to the railroad depot and meet Senator Henry Teller and learn about the silver panic and the crash of 1893. So if you enjoy these stories also, join us on October 14th. The Animas Museum has a special coach on the Cascade train that day. And we will be doing a narrated tour. You can't get a narrated tour today on the train. So this is your one opportunity this year. We're going to do a narrated tour talking about the points along the way from between Durango and Cascade and all the way back. Tickets are $100 each, and all proceeds go directly to support the museum. You can purchase tickets on our website or give us a call, 970-259-2402, or drop in and we can take care of you. Finally, some usual shameless self-promotion. We're open Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. and on Wednesdays from 1 p.m. until 7 p.m. And we'd love to see you. Just drop on by. And if you need to do research, we'd really appreciate it if you gave us a heads up so we can pull information together for you. And we do charge $15 an hour for supervised research. So again, if you have questions, info@animasmuseum.org. Check out our website at animasmuseum.org, where we do have all of the recorded webinars. If you click on events and then click on past events, all the recordings are available there. And also the event next Saturday will be recorded, but it won't be live streamed. So it'll be a little bit of a delay before we get that online, but we will. Phew. And if there's no more questions or nothing else, thank you so much for coming today. And as always, if you want to see more programming like this, become a member. We'd love to have you join us, or hit the donate button on our website. And we truly appreciate all of your support. Thank you, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everybody.